The rain fell hard over the lonely farm. John had just finished fixing the generator when he heard something strange a knock. It's not just any knock, but slow, soft, almost unsure. It was nearly midnight and no one ever came here. His farm was far from the city, on a quiet colony world where humans had settled long ago. He lived alone, by choice. Grabbing his old jacket and a flashlight, he walked to the front door. Another knock came this time, quicker. Then a voice followed. "Please help me," the voice said. It was female. "I ran away from my husband. Please let me in." John froze. He wasn't expecting anyone. He had no neighbors nearby. And the voice, it wasn't human. His hand moved to the small blaster hidden behind the door. He turned the handle slowly. The door creaked open, and in the cold rain stood a woman. Not just any woman, an alien, tall, with glowing purple eyes, wet silver, hair clinging to her face, and skin like smooth pale lavender. She was wrapped in a thin, torn cloak that barely kept her warm. In her arms she held a small child, no older than 5. The girl was shivering, her little face half buried in the woman's chest. John stared at them, not knowing what to say. "I'm not here to hurt you," the woman said softly. "I swear on my daughter's life." John didn't speak. He stepped aside and let them in. The woman walked slowly, her legs shaking. She didn't sit. She just stood there holding the child close. John closed the door and turned up the heater. He handed her a towel and pointed to the old couch. "You both need to dry off." She hesitated, then nodded. As she sat down, the child clung to her tighter. "What's your name?" John asked, keeping his voice calm. "Selah," she replied. "What?" "And this is Miri." He looked at the child. Her eyes were large, golden, and full of fear. She didn't speak. "Why were you running?" he asked. Selah looked down at her hands. They were trembling. Slowly, she pulled back part of her sleeve. On her wrist was a metal band black, with red symbols glowing faintly. John had seen something like that before. It was a tracker often. Used to mark slaves or bonded servants in some alien empires. "I escaped," she whispered. "My husband is powerful. He doesn't love me. He owns me." John's jaw clenched. He had seen cruelty before, during the Outer Wars. But to see it standing in his living room like this, holding a child that made something inside him burn? "Are you being followed?" he asked. "I don't know," Selah said, "but he'll come. He always finds me." John stood up and moved toward the control panel. Checked the perimeter alarms, nothing yet. But that didn't mean they were safe. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "You're both cold and hungry. We'll talk more in the morning." Selah's eyes softened, as if she didn't expect kindness. "Thank you," she said. John walked to the kitchen. He warmed up some leftover stew and brought it over. Selah took it slowly, letting Miri eat first. The little girl's hands were thin, her fingers trembling as she brought the spoon to her mouth. She didn't speak, but her eyes watched John with silent curiosity. After they ate, Selah laid Miri down on the couch and wrapped her in a blanket. The child fell asleep quickly, finally warm. John sat across the room, watching the rain beat against the window. "Where are you from?" he asked. Selah answered quietly. "The Syrian system. I was part of a noble house. My marriage was arranged. I thought it was duty. But he treated me like nothing." John nodded slowly. He didn't press further. Then, as the room grew silent, a small beep echoed from Selah's cloak. She reached inside and pulled out a small, blinking device. Her eyes widened in fear. "What is it?" John asked. "The tracker," she whispered. "It's still active." John grabbed the device from her hands. "Why didn't you remove it?" "I tried," she said, "but it's tied to my heartbeat. If it's cut, it sends a signal." John stood up quickly and tossed the tracker into a lead-lined drawer, slamming it shut. "We'll figure it out," he said. Selah looked at him, confused. "Why are you helping us?" John didn't answer at first. He glanced at the sleeping child, then back at Selah. "Because no one else will," he said. "And I won't let anyone take a child back to hell." Outside, the storm grew louder. But inside the small farmhouse, a fire burned. Not just in the fireplace, but in John's chest. Something was coming, and he knew this was only the beginning. Before sunrise, John was already awake. He stood at the window, watching the early fog wrap around the fields like a ghost. His shotgun rested nearby, and the fire from last night still gave off some warmth. Behind him, on the old couch, Selah slept with her daughter curled tightly against her. But John hadn't slept at all. Something about her. Story didn't sit right, not because he didn't believe it, but because he believed it too much. That tracker, those scars, and the fear in her eyes, they weren't fake. As the sky began to brighten, Selah stirred. She looked around quickly, like someone who had slept in danger for too long. Her hand went to Miri's back. The girl was still asleep, her little arms around her mother's waist. "You stayed up all night?" Selah said quietly. John didn't respond at first. "I've seen what fear looks like," he finally said. "You've lived with it for a long time." Sat up slowly. Her cloak had dried, but her clothes underneath were still torn in places. John noticed something he hadn't seen before, mark running down her shoulder. At first he thought it was just a scar, but when the light touched it, it shimmered. Faintly, it wasn't just a scar, it was a symbol, carved and burned deep into her skin. "What is that?" John asked. She hesitated. Then she pulled her sleeve back completely, revealing more. Thin golden patterns, some sharp, some swirling. Ran across her arms like tattoos, but they were deep, painful, and glowing faintly beneath the skin. "I was claimed," she said. "Marked by him." John stepped closer. "He did that to you? After I tried to leave the first time?" But the room felt colder, despite the fire. John sat down across from her. "You said he's powerful. Who is he?" Selah looked down. "High Lord Varak of the Ulari Dominion. He rules 5 moons and commands over 7 slave fleets. I was supposed to be a symbol of peace's gift bride, but once I was his, peace didn't matter anymore." John clenched his fist. He had heard that name during the war. Varak was no politician. He was a butcher in noble robes. "Does he know you're here?" John asked. Selah shook her head. "Not yet." The tracker was weak-old tech. It might take time before he locates this place. But once he does, he will send someone. He always does. John stood and walked toward the drawer where he locked the tracker. "Then we better make sure you're ready." Selah looked confused. "What do you mean? I mean, if he comes, you fight. Right. You defend your daughter. You don't run this time." Selah lowered her eyes. "You think I'm weak?" "No," John said. "I think you're tired. But there's still fight, and Y can see it." She touched her arm where the mark ended, just above her wrist. "When I was younger, I trained as a guardian of my house. I was good. But after the marriage, I wasn't allowed to touch weapons again."
Ow.
John reached for a box in the corner of the room. He opened it and pulled out an old blaster pistol. "I'm to remember who you were." Selah looked at it for a moment, then took the weapon with steady hands. Her fingers wrapped around it like they remembered the weight. Then a sound interrupted. The silence a quiet whimper. Miri had woken up. She sat up, blinking, her golden eyes wide as she looked between them. John knelt beside her. "You hungry?" She nodded, shyly. John smiled and stood up. He headed to the kitchen and started warming food. Behind him, Selah wrapped her daughter in a thick blanket and whispered softly in their language. Miri leaned into her, but her eyes kept peeking toward John. "She's never seen a human up close," Selah said, her voice softer now. "Most people haven't seen a Syrian up close either," John replied. As they ate together, something shifted. The silence wasn't as heavy. Selah seemed to breathe easier. Miri even gave a tiny smile when John handed her a warm slice of bread. But the moment didn't last long. A red light blinked on the corner console. John stood quickly and checked. A signal?" Selah asked. John nodded. "Perimeter sensor. Something's out near the western field." Selah stood up fast. "He's found us already." "It could be an animal," John said. "But I'll go check." He grabbed his rifle and stepped outside into the cold morning fog. The sun hadn't fully risen, and the wet ground made his boots sink slightly. He moved silently toward the field. Then he saw footprints, large ones, too heavy for an animal. Had been here, He scanned the area but found nothing. Whoever it was had already backed off, or was watching from somewhere hidden. When he returned, Selah was holding Miri tightly. "Well?" she asked. "Someone's testing the land," John said. "Not ready to strike yet, but soon." Selah nodded slowly. "Then I'll be ready too." She looked down at Miri, who had dozed off again in her lap. "I won't let him take her," she whispered, "even if I die." John placed a blanket around them both. "You won't have to." And in that quiet farmhouse, as another day began, 2 survivors, 1 human, and 1 alien started preparing for a war no one else would fight for them. The wind had stopped, but the silence was worse than the storm. John checked the outer fence again. Nothing was broken, but deep boot marks circled near the far trees. Whoever had come in the night had walked the border but never crossed, like a predator measuring its prey. Inside the house, Selah stayed quiet as she polished the old blaster John had given her. Her hands moved carefully, but her eyes kept glancing toward the window. She felt it too, something was watching them. John placed 2 extra shells in his pocket and scanned the forest with binoculars. Still no movement, still no sound. But they both knew someone was out there. "Miri still asleep?" John asked. Selah nodded. "She's tired. She hasn't slept this peacefully in months." John didn't say anything, but he felt a tightness in his chest. That child smiled in her sleep now. A tiny flicker of peace, but it wouldn't last. "Your husband wouldn't come himself," John said. "He'd send someone." "Yes," Selah replied. "A shadow hunter." John looked at her. "They're not soldiers," she explained. "They're trained from childhood to track and retrieve. They don't speak, they don't stop. Once they lock onto a scent, they keep coming." John's grip on the rifle tightened. "And he sent one after his own wife?" "He doesn't see me as a wife," she said. "He sees me as stolen property." John paced the room. "We'll make sure no one ever takes you again." Selah stood. "You don't understand. If it is a true shadow hunter, you won't see him until he's already inside." Just then, the old surveillance monitor blinked. A faint image appeared, something moving at the edge of the trees. Only for a second, then gone. John rewound the footage frame by frame. One single shot, he caught it. A tall figure covered in dark armor that seemed to blend with the forest. The eyes glowed a soft red. No visible weapons, just a long staff on his back. "He's already here," John whispered. Selah turned to Miri and lifted her gently. "We have to move." "No," John said. "If we run, he'll follow." "You said he won't stop?" "So we fight here on our ground." Selah hesitated. Then she nodded. They spent the day preparing. John placed traps near the back windows, old mining charges buried under the soil. He reinforced the doors, covered the windows with metal plates, and set up motion lights around the house. Selah walked through the hallway, holding the blaster like she'd held it years ago. Her body moved with purpose now, her back straighter, her fear controlled. Miri stayed inside the bedroom, playing softly with the stuffed animal John had given her. She didn't understand the danger fully, but she saw the way her mother's hands shook when no one was looking. That night, the wind returned, but something else came with it. A whistle, faint, high-pitched. It wasn't natural. John grabbed his rifle and stood near the front window. Selah watched the back, then silence again. Suddenly, the light on the side of the house blinked. A soft crunch outside the kitchen window. John turned just in time to see the shadow leap over the garden fence. He raised the rifle and fired. The blast hit empty air. Selah spun around. A door creaked. Then another. "He's trying to confuse us," John said. "He's fast." Selah nodded and moved toward the hallway. "He'll try to come from the roof." That's what they do, come from above, like shadows. John climbed to the attic, flashlight in hand. He moved slowly, checking every beam. Then dash thud behind him. He turned fast, but nothing was there. "Another sound below now," Selah's voice shouted. "He's inside." John rushed down the stairs and saw the figure standing in the center of the living room, tall, silent, eyes glowing red. No footsteps, no sound. He had moved through the house like a ghost. Selah fired first. The shot hit the wall. He was already gone. The shadow moved between the beams like liquid. His staff snapped forward and knocked the blaster from Selah's hands. John fired again, grazing the hunter's shoulder. Sparks flew, but the armor didn't break. The shadow leaped backward, landing like a cat. For the first time, he looked at John. No words, just cold purpose. But something changed. Miri's voice rang out. "Mama." That second of distraction was enough. John slammed into the hunter from the side, crashing him into the wall. The staff clattered to the ground. Selah grabbed her daughter, ran toward the back door. The hunter kicked John off with terrifying strength and vanished again into the shadows. By the time John got back to his feet, the figure was gone, but something remained. A mark burned into the wooden floor. A message. "Next time I take her." Selah stood in the doorway, holding her daughter tight. "He'll come again," she said. "And next time he won't miss." John nodded. "Then, next time, neither will we." The air inside the farmhouse was heavy, like something invisible had entered and stayed behind. John locked every door, every hatch, and rearmed the traps. But he knew it wasn't enough. The shadow hunter had broken into their home once. Could do it again. Next time it wouldn't be a warning. Selah sat near the fireplace with Miri asleep in her lap, her arms wrapped around the childlike armor. But her eyes stared ahead, cold, distant, angry. "She's all I have," she whispered. John nodded without turning. In the corner of the room, the small device they had taken from Selah's cloak started blinking again, red. Then blue, then red. It wasn't the tracker this time. It was a message. A direct signal. John tapped a few keys. The screen lit up. A face appeared. He was handsome in a cruel way, sharp eyes. Perfect skin, long dark hair braided with silver threads. His voice came through smooth and slow. "My dear Selah, the man said, I see you've run to a new owner. But we both know what you rue were mine, by law, by blood, by seal.
Ow.
Return, and your daughter will be raised in comfort. Refuse, and I will take her by fire." Selah stood up fast. Her hand trembled, but her voice was steady. "Varrock." The message continued. "Your little human friend cannot protect you. He will fall like the last one did. You remember him, don't you? The one who helped you escape before? I crushed his skull with my boot." John watched her reaction closely. She didn't blink, but a tear slipped down her cheek without her knowing. She turned and picked up the blaster from the table. "I'm done running," she said. John didn't argue. He understood now this wasn't just about hiding anymore. This was a war she couldn't avoid. He walked to the back room and pulled open a crate buried beneath tools and dust. Inside were old weapons from the colony war, laser traps, explosive charges, and a reinforced vest made for frontline combat. He handed the vest to Selah. "Can you fight in this?" She ran her fingers over it and nodded. "I used to wear something heavier." John smiled slightly.
You'll need to remember
Everything. Later that evening, Selah walked out to the field with him. They set up motion-detecting drones above the trees. If the hunter came back, they'd see him before he reached the porch. But they both knew Varrock wouldn't stop with just one hunter. If Selah didn't return, he would come himself. As they worked, Selah suddenly asked, "Have you ever lost someone?" Shh. Paused. Yes, she didn't press. And he didn't explain. Back inside, Miri had drawn something with old chalk on the wooden floor, a picture of herself. Selah and John standing in front of the house. 3 small figures, 1 big sun. John stared at it for a long time. Then he reached for a small chip on the table, the one that came with Varrock's message. He plugged it into a reader. Searching deeper, he found something buried inside, hidden. Signal pinging their exact location every 6 minutes. The message had been more than a threat. It was a beacon. "They're coming," he said. Selah looked at him calmly. "How long? 3 hours? Maybe 4? She didn't panic. She placed Miri gently in a hidden wall compartment lined with shielding. The girl blinked up, confused. Mama, you need to stay here, Miri. No matter what happens outside, you don't come out unless I say so. Miri gripped her mother's hand, but I'm scared. Selah kissed her forehead. I'll be back for you, I promise. John watched quietly. He had seen bravery on the battlefield, but this was something deeper. She was not just protecting her child. She was about to face the monster that once owned her as the sun dipped low. The skies turned orangened in the distance. A dark shape moved across the clouds. A ship, fast, sleek, royal in design. He's here, Selah whispered. John raised his rifle and let him come. The sky cracked open, not with thunder, but with fire. A ship, black and sharp, like a blade, tore through the clouds and hovered above the fields. Its engines rumbled low, like a beast warning its prey. The symbols on its hull glowed red. Mark of High Lord Varric. John and Selah stood at the front of the house, both armed, both silent. Behind them, Miri waited deep inside the hidden chamber, surrounded by steel and shielding. She was safe for now. The ship lowered slowly, kicking up dust and shaking the ground. Then it stopped. The engines faded, but no hatch opened. No one stepped out. Selah's hand tightened on her blaster. He's not here to talk. No, John said. He's here to take. Suddenly, a part of the field exploded. One of the mines John had buried earlier. A flash of fire lit the grass. In movement, shapes armored soldiers rushed out of the ship like insects. Not machines, not drones. Real living warriors bred for capture and pain. There were 6 of them. All dressed in black armor, their helmets smooth with glowing red eyes. No voices, just a signal blink, and they moved as one. John fired first, dropping one before the others even touched the ground. Selah moved fast, her old training coming back in a rush. She aimed without blinking and shot the second attacker. Through the chest, but these weren't like the Shadow Hunter. They didn't move quietly, stormed forward with brute strength, smashing into the front of the house. Wood cracked. Metal bent. One of them crashed through the window, roaring like a wild beast. John tackled him, slamming the soldier into the ground and driving a knife under the armor plate. Blood spilled. The body twitched. Then silence. Selah spun to cover the back door, but 2 more were already there, trying to force their way in. She ducked low, rolled under the table, and fired 3 shots. 1 missed, but the other 2 hit. One soldier dropped to the floor, unmoving. The other crawled back outside, dragging his leg. John's voice rang out from the hall. Fall back to the kitchen. We hold here. Selah dashed across the room, but a blast hit near her shoulder. Sparks flew. She screamed but kept moving. John grabbed her arm and pulled her behind cover. You good? I've had worse, she said, breathing hard. Then everything went still. No more footsteps. No more blast. Just silence. And then the front door opened. Not with force, not with a crash, but slowly, calmly. John looked up and there he was. VAR. Cat. Tall. Perfect. Terrifying. He wore a long cloak that shimmered like oil under the lights. His armor was polished, his face untouched by the fight outside. He stepped into the house like he owned it. His eyes moved over the damage, the blood, the bodies. Then he smiled. Selah, he said, I told you I would come. Selah stood, aiming her blaster at him. Take one more step, she warned, but Varric didn't stop. He walked right up to her, close enough to smell the smoke on her clothes. You were beautiful when I bought you, he said. Now look at you, dirty, weak, hiding behind a human. John raised his rifle. Say one more word, he growled. Varric turned to him, amused. And you must be the new owner. Is this how Earth treats its prizes? Hiding in wooden houses with rusty weapons? I'm not her owner, John said. I'm her shield. Varric's eyes narrowed. Then he moved. Faster than expected, he struck John with a blast from his Palma hidden shock device. John flew backward, crashing into the wall. Selah screamed and fired, Varric caught the shot on his wrist plate. The energy hissed, but didn't break through. You always did aim to straight, he mocked. Selah backed up toward the hidden wall, where Miri was hidden. But Varric was already watching. Your daughter, he said softly, you would raise. Her in a shack, away from her legacy, from the stars? She's not yours, Selah said. She never was. Varric smiled. You were mine. But to everything you bore is mine. He stepped forward, but then stopped. A sound sharp and cold clicked from the corner. John stood again, blood on his face, holding a detonator. I rigged the whole entryway, he said. Step forward, and this house turns to dust. Varric tilted his head. You wouldn't destroy your home. I would if it meant she stays free. Selah looked at John, eyes wide. He meant it. Varric didn't blink, but he didn't move either. You have a choice, John said. Leave nor leave in pieces. Varric stared at Selah. You'll regret this. Then he turned and walked out. No orders. No fight. He just left. The ship rose into the air and disappeared into the clouds. John dropped the detonator. Selah ran to him, helped him sit down. You okay? She asked. He coughed. Been worse. She touched his shoulder and for the first time. There was no fear in her eyes, only fire. He'll come back, she said. John nodded. Then we'll be ready. The sun rose slowly, painting gold over the blood-stained grass. Smoke still curled from the broken window. The farm smelled like metal, fire, and something darker. Battle, pain, memory. John sat on the steps of the porch, his arm wrapped in bandages. Staring at the empty sky where the warship had vanished just hours ago, Selah stood near the broken fence, her cloak blowing gently in the wind. Her face was calm, but her mind raced. Varric was alive. He had walked into her life, touched her child's name with his filthy voice and walked away unharmed, but not untouched. Selah had seen it behind the proud smile. Behind his words there had been doubt. For the first time, Varric hadn't gotten what he wanted, and it shook him. She turned and looked back at the house. Miri sat by the window inside, holding a small toy John had carved for her. Her tiny eyes were full of questions. She had seen flashes of battle. She had felt the fear. But now, she waited for her mother to return, for a promise to be kept. Selah stepped inside. John looked up. He'll come back, he said. I know, Selah replied. He won't accept defeat. His pride won't allow it. Then we run, John offered. We take Miri and vanish before his next strike. But Selah didn't move. No, she said. I've run enough. John blinked. You're choosing to stay? Selah nodded. Running teaches her that fear wins, that the past controls the future. I won't teach her that. She walked over to the shelf and picked up the broken blaster. Her fingers ran over the damage, over the scorch marks left by the fight. Do you remember the first time I knocked on your door? She asked. John gave a faint smile. Hard to forget. I didn't come here to hide, she said. I thought. I did, but I came here to breathe, to find something real. She turned to face him. You gave me safety. But more than that, you gave me strength again. John stood up, wincing slightly. You gave it to yourself. I just handed you the tools. They both smiled, tired but real. Selah walked into the room where Miri sat. She knelt down and gently pulled the child into her arms. We're staying, she whispered. No more hiding. Miri looked up. Will he come back? Yes, Selah answered. But this time we're ready. John stepped into the room. There's something else you should know. I checked the satellite logs. His ship sent out a signal after it left. Selah's expression darkened. What kind of signal? A distress call, John said. A challenge. A message to his fleet. He's calling for reinforcements. Plans to return with a crew. Selah stood up slowly. Then we'll need help. There's no one nearby, John replied. Nearest colony is days away. Selah's eyes narrowed. I don't mean soldiers. I mean truth. John tilted his head. She opened a panel from her cloak, pulling out a small, flat crystallata Syrian memory core. Hey. She placed it on the table. This holds everything, she said. Every scar, every order, every punishment. Varric recorded it. All he thought he was above consequences. John leaned closer. You stole this? I copied it, Selah said, before I ran. John stared at the glowing crystal. You just became the most dangerous woman in the Dominion. Selah smiled. I was always dangerous. I just forgot. But night, they sent the data into space through hidden relays, through old channels, out toward the stars where Syrian. Rebels still whispered and hoped it would take time. But once the truth spread, Varric's power would begin to crack. Later, as they prepared for the next day, John built stronger defenses. Selah trained with him in the field, blaster in hand. Miri watched them from the porch, sometimes smiling, sometimes quiet, at dinner. They ate together like a family. Afterward, as Miri slept curled up in warm blankets, Selah stepped outside and stood beside John under the stars. You could have told me to leave, she said, sent me away the first night. John looked at her. I would have lost the only thing that made this empty place feel alive again. She turned to him, eyes glowing softly in the moonlight. I'm not your guest anymore, she said. This is my home too now. John nodded, then let them come. We'll show them what home means. And as the wind swept across the farm, carrying the scent of earth and ash, they stood side by side, not as strangers anymore. Not as fugitive and hosts, but as something new, something strong, something unbreakable. The sky turned dark not with night, but with war. 3 warships hovered above the valley, casting giant shadows over the land. Their engines didn't roar, they growled. The red banners of the Ulari Dominion hung beneath their wings like warnings. Written in fire, on the ground, John adjusted the shoulder plate of his armor. It didn't fit like it used to, but it would do. He loaded the last energy cell into his rifle and looked toward the field. Selah stood at the front, her blaster resting on her hip, her cloak gone. She wore Syrian battle gear, faded but sharp-marked, with old symbols of her bloodline now covered in ash and grit. And beside her, Miri watched quietly, clutching a stuffed animal in one hand and wearing a small vest stitched together from scraps. She knew she wasn't going to fight. But she had asked one thing that morning. Can I watch you win, Mama? Selah had nodded. Now the moment had come. The lead warship opened its doors. A long ramp dropped down and dozens of soldiers in black. Armor poured out like a wave. Behind them, calm and smiling, Varric stepped forward, his cloak flowing, steps slow. He wasn't rushing. He believed victory was already his. John stepped beside Selah. You ready? Selah didn't look at him. Her eyes locked on Varric. I've never been readier. Varric raised his hand and motioned forward. The soldiers charged. Selah didn't wait. She stepped out into the open, firing without hesitation. Every shot was placed with precision, every movement sharp and trained. She dropped 2 attackers before they reached the outer fence. John moved with her, covering the left side. His old training came back like breath. Traps exploded, sending dust and flames into the air. The house, once a quiet shelter now, roared like a fortress. The soldiers began to fall back, regrouping under Varric's orders. But something was wrong. Selah stepped forward again, this time holding a second blaster. You thought I was weak, she shouted. You thought I would always belong to you? Varric narrowed his eyes. You don't belong to anyone, he said. You were bought, marked, bound. Selah threw something to the ground, a small round disc. It cracked. A signal pulsed above. Another ship appeared. Not Varric's. This. One carried no flags, but its message was clear. The rebels had heard. Varric stepped back, his soldiers hesitating. From the new ship, a voice echoed over the valley. We have seen the proof. The High Lord's crimes are real. This woman is no slave. She is our witness, our shield-bearer. We stand with her, Varric screamed, drawing his sword. But Selah wasn't waiting for him. She ran forward faster than John had ever seen her move, and tackled Varric to the ground. They rolled in the dirt, fighting hand to hand. His strength was brutal, but her rage was older, deeper. He struck her across the face, cutting her cheek. She slammed her elbow into his ribs, cracking bone. He grabbed her throat, lifting her off the ground. "You're still mine," he hissed. She looked down at him, blood in her mouth, and smiled. "No, I'm free." Her blaster fired point blank. Varric's body hit the ground still. Cold finished. The battlefield froze. The soldiers dropped their weapons. The rebel ship lowered slowly, landing beside the field. A group of Syrian warriors stepped out, faces marked with the same noble symbols as Selah's, but worn with pride, not chains. One of them bowed. "Your story has awakened many. The rebellion lives through your truth." Selah didn't bow back. "I don't want a throne," she said. "I want my daughter safe." John walked over and put a hand on her shoulder. "You've done more than that," he said. "You gave her a future." Later that night, the fires burned low, not from battle, but from celebration. Miri danced near the porch, giggling as the rebel soldiers shared stories and songs. She was no longer hiding behind walls. She stood under open sky, fearless. Selah sat beside John, a blanket over her shoulders. "I don't know what happens next." She said, "You build something new," he answered. "Something that's finally yours." She looked at him. "And you? What do you want?" He smiled gently. "Just one thing." She raised an eyebrow. "To never see you at my door, soaking wet and scared ever again." She laughed, soft and honest. "Deal." And as the stars returned to their place in the sky, and the blood of war dried in the soil, Selah, once a runaway, once a prisoner, became something greater. Not a weapon, not a queen, not a slave, but a woman who chose freedom and fought until it was hers.